Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Pulp Today. I think this is actually number 43. And I only remember that because number 42, we did Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy because, of course. And once again, I have a guest, and I have a great guest today, the amazing Hector Navarro. Hector, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. I wish there was a better connection between the material we're talking about and the number 43. I don't know if there was.
There is not.
Oh, well, it's fine. But my name is Hector, and I'm a host based out of Los Angeles, and I've done some stuff for some various internet channels, things like Nerdist and Geek and Sundry. I have been able to make kind of a living out of talking about the stuff that I love, which is usually comic books, movies, and sometimes some other stuff. But I think those are kind of my first two loves. And so I'm very, very honored to be a guest on the show. This is fantastic.
I realized when I was asking you to do this, I think the first comics press I ever did was your show.
Awesome. That's great.
I think I came on your show. There were two hosts, two co-hosts. I think Amy Dallin.
That's right. Amy Dallin, Whitney Moore. It was The Poll on Geek and Sundry. Yep.
I think that was it. That was when I was a baby comics writer. I think I had written maybe one series.
Yeah.
And I think you asked me who my favorite Ninja Turtle was, and that was before I had been working with Kevin Eastman. So that was
very cool.
Funny.
Do you remember what your answer was? I don't remember what you said.
Yes, I answered Michelangelo.
Okay, very nice. Has that answer changed since working with Eastman?
It actually has not. It actually has not. I had a little bit of an imposter syndrome after it came out of my mouth because I was like, do I really know all four of them? Do I have their personalities down? But three things. One, he is a great character. Two, it's my father's name, Michelangelo Avallone. My name is a classical art joke. I'm Michelangelo's David.
And that's awesome.
And three, I'm friends with Robbie Rist.
Yeah, great.
Michelangelo in the first movie.
Absolutely.
So it's a combination of things, but he is a fun character. Are you reading and enjoying The Last Ronin?
I have heard nothing but good things about The Last Ronin. And what I have is when the new IDW series started coming out, I think I want to say 2011, which was like right when the Ninja Turtles property was bought by Nickelodeon / Viacom or whatever. But then like IDW was like, we're doing new comics. It's a new continuity. We're bringing on Kevin Eastman as like, to help us and to shepherd it and to kind of, be the godfather of he's the turtle papa.
Right.
And I was reading a lot of it when it was coming out, and I really did love it.
Yeah, Tom did a good job.
It really fantastic stuff. Yeah. And I remember I got to a story arc that was like the secret history of the Foot Clan, and it kind of blew my mind. As a fan of the original Ninja Turtles movie with Robbie Rist and all of those amazing performers in that film. I mean, I don't know if you could see, look at this little setup of all of the Ninja Turtle movie figures that they've been coming out with the past couple of years. And there's the Turtles and Casey Jones and Shredder and everything. And I ordered April O'Neil, very excited. But there was a lot of great changes to the mythos in that comic series that I was very excited by. But at one point, this happens a lot of the time with my comic reading, David, is I'll get to a point and I'll be like, I love this. I'm going to like shelve it. I'm going to put it aside for a second, and I will someday like read the whole thing in one go.
Right.
They haven't stopped. So I'm very behind, but I am planning to. I have like some of their early, like sort of larger collections of collecting series and stuff, but I am planning to at some point sit down and like get through everything and catch up to that point. Right now I'm doing that with, it's really fantastic. And I'm kind of doing that with some of my other, favorite series. I'm kind of rereading Invincible with my two friends that I do a YouTube show with, because one of them has never read it, and we decided to try to link up with the hype of the TV series. And so we're kind of focusing on that, but I would not be surprised if they wanted to, when we're done with that, like pivot to Ninja Turtles, because I have heard nothing but good things about pretty much really every major thing in that series. Yeah.
It's sort of the Dark Turtle Returns. Kevin is a huge Frank Miller fan, obviously.
Yes.
And the story was hatched, for want of a better word, when he, sort of at the height of his Frank Miller fandom. So it's very much that thing of like, let's tell the last story.
I love it.
That you can tell about the Ninja Turtles. And it's really, Kevin's work on is great. Ben Bishop, who does the Drawing Blood comic that I do with Kevin, is one of the artists on it. And it's funny. I don't know the name of the main artist because when I talk to Kevin, he refers to them as the twins because it's two guys. And I actually don't know that I've heard their names out loud.
But the twins are great. Yeah, but the twins are great.
The twins are great. I love what the twins are doing. So, but John Carter of Mars.
Yeah. Also has some green characters in it. There's
some very green characters in it. Tarkas Jeddak of Thark, which just rolls off the tongue like very few things in science fiction.
Beautiful.
And you know, so Star Wars comes out in 1977. I'm 12 and I'm a voracious reader. And one of the better things I think that art like Star Wars can do for you is, yes, it rips off a million things. You then get to discover those things.
Yes.
So Star Wars made me read Dune and Foundation for their galactic empires and their spice and their desert planets. And John Carter is very, you know, the Jeddaks, you know, and the Bantha. I think there's a Banth in there.
Yeah.
All of it was supposed to, there's a phrase in William Burroughs, mythic resonance. And I'm a big believer in mythic resonance. And it's not ripping off when they talk about spice in Star Wars. It's mythic resonance. It's, you know, blasters, you know, I think the first time blasters is in a movie is in Forbidden Planet. They refer to the ray guns as blasters. And they refer to hyperspace in Forbidden Planet.
Wow.
You know, in 1956, there's a starship coming out of hyperspace.
Yeah.
So all of those tropes that have been in science fiction literature forever. I did an episode a couple of months ago about Galactic Patrol by E. Doc Smith, the Lensman series. That's another, you know, thing that Star Wars kind of reaches into. I will say my favorite piece of Star Wars trivia, and I'm proud of the fact that I'm sure other people have noticed it, but I'm the one that added it to IMDb as soon as I noticed it. The plot is lifted somewhat from Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress. You ever notice that the guy that Darth Vader strangles on the Death Star is literally in the middle of saying the phrase Hidden Fortress?
Wow, that's right.
That is the closest to George Lucas being witty I can ever find. It's almost like Darth Vader is going, don't say Hidden Fortress in this
I find
movie.
your lack of faith disturbing.
But the guy's like, it hasn't given you the clairvoyance enough to conjure up those data tapes or find the rebels' hidden fortress. It's like, we're not saying Hidden Fortress in this movie, my dude.
That's
like,
great.
We're not doing that. But anyway, John Carter's from 1912.
Originally, yeah.
And I love, this is something I discovered fairly recently, that genre, you know, space opera, particularly the John Carter type thing, I have heard referred to as planetary romance.
I have also heard that phrase, yes.
I love that.
It's great.
I love the idea because it's swords and flying machines and, you know, I'm trying to remember if I did a John Carter riff in the Betty Page comics.
Great.
And I think I called the issue Planetary Romance.
I mean, it's perfect. And what I love about that descriptor too is that there is a lot of genres that Edgar Rice Burroughs was, I think, kind of messing with and just kind of playing around with. But I like that fans of this series of books and these stories have kind of centered on like, it's a romance. that a huge takeaway, if not the takeaway, should be the story behind like this guy from Earth who we don't know too much about, but is kind of mysterious and everything. And in these books, he's definitely too perfect and too skilled and too everything, can still fall in love with a beautiful princess from another world, and that they really truly love each other, and it's very romantic and how sweet they are with each other. And he's constantly using that Southern charm of like, I meant no disrespect. I didn't know your customs, so you'll have to forgive this old Virginia cavalryman as I'm trying to learn your, you know. I love that stuff. I think that's one of the most important things to kind of to lock into when you're experiencing these old stories, I think.
And Tarzan too, like how he gave these stories heart was by making them essentially, Tarzan is a love story. The ending of that is devastating. You know, it's Casablanca. He gives up the woman he loves so that, you know, she can be happier than she would be with him.
Right.
And that's terrific stuff. And yeah, John Carter's motivation in the, you know, to me, the disappointment with the whole series is that it's not about him. We give up on John Carter after book 3.
True.
And, you know, and his son is not interesting and different enough from him that I don't know why we.
And look, you have a very clever familial lineage name, but John Carter's son that he had with Deja Thoris is named Carthoris. Like, it's a terrible clunky name. It's really bad. They should have named their kid something else. Really, really, really bad.
I mean, we should feel glad that he didn't name the kid, you know, Robert E. Lee Thoris or whatever, you know, like seriously there could be worse things.
Absolutely.
It's funny. I decided more as not as commentary on John Carter, but as just as an interesting twist. In my Betty Page story, she slowly comes to realize that the John Carter guy is actually the bad guy, and the creepy looking aliens are the good guys. And it was really more a commentary on, I kind of hated in all art, really, where the hero is the hero just because he's good looking and the bad guys are ugly. I love Jack Kirby, but I've always kind of hated, it's not the Eternals. I think it's in.
Is it the New Gods?
Not the DC version of the Eternals.
The Forever People?
No, not one of the Fourth World ones. The Celestials. I'm trying to remember what the comic was called. But the good guys were like the Celestials, who were all gorgeous, and the bad guys were the Deviants, who were all gross.
That is the Eternals, I think. That is the Eternals. Yeah.
Oh, is that in the Eternals?
The Deviants are all demonic looking and everything, and the good characters look like Greek gods. You know, they're very
and it's just
handsome,
like,
chiseled people.
A guy that hated Nazis should know better than to make the main thing that distinguishes the good guys and the bad guys how pretty their hair is. Like, that's not a that's a rare case of Jack sort of not getting it. But I wanted to do a thing about that, and of course, by making him the bad guy, I leaned into the Confederate soldier part.
Absolutely. How could you not?
I had my John Carter character say that he was a veteran of Nathan Bedford Forrest's cavalry, and Nathan Bedford Forrest, for those who don't know, goes on to found the Ku Klux Klan. So at some point, Betty Page is from Tennessee, but she's like, you have bad taste in leadership, dude.
Absolutely. I think a really interesting thing is, I think it was like a few years ago, I saw a project, and I can't remember if it was something that was, I think it was being kickstarted, but like some people got together and they were doing their riff on John Carter of Mars. It may have even been a direct remake, but the difference is they made John Carter a black soldier from the Civil War. And I'm like, there's a whole bunch of storytelling possibilities you could tell with that. I also think that, you know, I understand the way that Disney adapted the movie. I really, truly love the movie. I love certain aspects of the film. Big fan of the movie. I think Andrew Stanton made a great PG-13. You know, it was not a salacious, everybody's naked on Mars, this is rated R for adults. It was a PG-13 Star Wars, living in that world. And I wonder if the movie should have tried a better attempt at incorporating more diversity while they were on Mars, because even though all the people were like the red Martians and there was some variation of skin tone, it was mostly kind of like American or British white actors that had the sort of henna tattoo look.
Yeah.
You know, and in the John Carter mythos, there's other groups of people. There are black Martians that have, you know, an interesting and sometimes very stereotypical and frustrating like depiction. But I'm like, I wonder if you guys could have tried to do something to change it, but still kind of keep the spirit of it, or lean more into what John Carter as a man, what he believes in at the beginning of the story, what his experience is on Mars, because it's Dances with Wolves, it's Avatar, it's so cliched that it's like he meets a tribe of aliens, and then when he comes back to Earth, he truly understands racism is bad because humans are all humans. It's like, well, maybe some of that.
And the thing about heroic fiction, I used to say this about Star Trek VI. One of the great things about Star Trek VI is because you have beloved characters, you can have them be racists for half the movie.
Yes.
And Captain Kirk discovering that he's a racist and regretting it
I love it.
I'm as bad as these people that wanted to fuck up the peace treaty. I hated Klingons just as much as they did. I wanted them to die. I was literally on board with genocide for the Klingon people.
Yep.
And I should know better. I'm a big boy. I've been dealing with aliens my whole life, but these killed my son. And I they gave him a rationale. But if you made that movie with any other set of characters, I think the audience would reject Admiral Kirk in scene 1 when he says, "Let them die."
Absolutely.
Don't trust them,
Absolutely.
But Spock having the old friend who's like, "No, Jim, you're better. You're a better man. I know you're better than this. I know you will come around and realize I'm doing the right. This is an opportunity to make peace between our peoples, and you're not seeing it because you're blinded by your own bigotry."
Yeah.
And you absolutely could have had John Carter look at his, red-skinned cavalry behind him and go, "What the hell was I fighting for in 1864?
Absolutely.
What was I trying to do?" And it was a missed opportunity to do that.
Yeah. And to not be super preachy about it or anything, but just to have that, because I think a really interesting part of the story that's at the end of this first novel that Burroughs wrote, where he goes back to Earth and he's like stuck for 10 years. And he, none of that story is really talked about, is really covered. And in the Disney adaptation, there's a great little twist sort of at the end, but the character does come back and they've changed his backstory and changed the character. He's still going on this space adventure, and the heart of the story is still there, this kind of Superman, style character. But I think that audiences are savvy enough that they would have accepted a little something in 2012 when that movie came out, something.
And also if you had changed him, I was just talking about this on another podcast, the amount of dedicated John Carter fans in the world would not fill a baseball stadium.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the idea that you're going to make some giant misstep by the story I told in the last podcast, and I'll tell it again, is I worked a little bit on the Red Sonja development for the new movie that's coming out.
Cool.
And the discussion would come up about Red Sonja's fans and not disappointing Red Sonja's fans. And I went on Comicron. Joey Soloway is writing and directing the movie. And they're an old friend of mine, and I love them dearly. And I showed them the Comicron sales figures for the latest issue of Red Sonja at Dynamite. Like, so Red Sonja fans are 18,000 people.
Correct.
Unless it's a first issue, in which case it's 27,000 people. But 18,000 people is the smallest theater at a multiplex in the middle of nowhere on the second weekend.
Yeah.
like if you're worried about offending and yes, people can be loud on Twitter.
Sure.
Whatever. But the number of people, and they have picked a mixed race.
Yeah.
Girl to play the part. And I think she's great casting. I think she's going to be terrific.
Yep.
But of course, people were outraged that she wasn't some pale German thing, and it's like, who cares?
Look, I watched not when I was too young. I think I was at a pretty good age when I first encountered the first Arnold Conan movie, and it was so weird and so bizarre, and I hadn't gotten into Conan yet, and I have since become a huge fan, and I'm kind of going back and rereading all of the classic Conan comics, as well as like the Dark Horse stuff from 20 years ago, as well as like the new Marvel stuff that they're doing now. But I in that research, I've learned that like diehard Conan fans, when that first Arnold movie came out, they absolutely had issues with it. And there's also real valid criticisms about how those two Arnold movies handle the Conan material, and what's kind of left out from it, and what's interesting about the material and the Robert E. Howard writing. But I think at the end of the day, those movies, that first movie especially, I think did more for bringing people into the Conan world. It's like you said at the beginning, it's like once you love a thing, then you can discover where that thing came from.
Yep.
And that's what this whole thing is about. And I feel like I experienced the same thing being a lifelong, since I was a kid, Spider-Man fan. It's a very popular character. I don't know if you're familiar. And so I was in high school when the first Spider-Man movie was released in 2002. I was in high school. This was The first theatrically, I know there was like a live action TV Spider-Man that was before my time a little bit, and there were various cartoons. And in that movie, man, I'll tell you a real quick story too. That I think sums up a lot of issues with fandom. The movie comes out and it's in May, and I went to school the following Monday after opening weekend, and two girls my age behind me in a math class were talking about characters Peter Parker and Mary Jane, and I was like, the world has changed. Like they're not. It's not Spider-Man. You know, they're saying like the secret identities of these characters. That as characters, they're invested in them. And then that summer, I was born and raised in San Diego, so I had been going to San Diego Comic-Con, and I was very spoiled, and you know, didn't even know as a kid it was the biggest of the conventions. But went to San Diego Comic-Con that summer, it was 2002, and there was a guy walking around in a Spider-Man outfit, interviewing people with a camera because he was part of a project where they were trying to raise money to remake or reshoot their own Spider-Man film. And this guy was, I'm serious. I mean, this is like, I mean, it's still kind of early days of the internet, but it's like the most common thing now is this entitlement. And this guy cornered me because I think I was also dressed up in the Spider-Man wrestling outfit from the first movie, that spray painted, you know, thing. My grandma helped me make the costume. It was a great costume. So he cornered me and he goes, this kid's dressed as Spider-Man. I was, you know, a small kid. And he's like, I'm going to talk to him and maybe try to get him, because he was like in his 20s or something.
Right.
And he was like, so you're a Spider-Man fan. Aren't you upset that they like changed certain details about the Spider-Man live action movie? And I went, no, because now I can share this with millions of people around the world.
Yep.
It's fine that he doesn't have mechanical web shooters. It's okay. Or it's a shortcut. Yes, it's all shorthand, but like now people know what this is, and then they can enjoy it. Right. And he was like, okay, like he couldn't get me. He goes, all right, I picked on the wrong kid. Okay, great. So it's and
the thing is, it's like, and guess what? And now we have movies where they're mechanical web shooters again because nobody gives a shit. Absolutely nobody gives a shit.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, it's so off topic, but I have to tell you the story. Around the time before that movie was being made, I used to occasionally do extra work. And I was doing extra work on this movie playing a cop. One of my fellow cops was this great stuntman named Michael Papajohn. And Papa John takes me aside at one point. He's like, so I was in he's from West Virginia, I think. He's like, so I was in the last Sam Raimi movie and For the Love of the Game. And I wrote him a letter saying, I love being in love for the love of the game. And can I, you know, I'll do anything in Spider-Man. I'll hold a spear. I'll do, you know, whatever small part you want to give me. And he said, so I went in and did an audition, and you're the first person I'm telling. I play a guy, I guess I kill his uncle or something like that. And he was unaware of the mythology. He had no idea. He literally thought he had been cast as thug number 5.
Yeah, he didn't know he was the burglar.
I said, dude, you're the destruction of Krypton. Like, you don't realize you're the guy killing Martha Kent you know, killing Martha and Thomas Wayne. He's like, really? Is it an important part? I said, oh my God, dude, it's so central to the mythology. You have no idea.
And they brought him back for Spider-Man 3 because they're like, you're friends with Sandman now, so we need you to come back. And
But Papa John, what I love about Papa John, he's a very good actor, but he's also a very good stuntman. And what I love about him is 99% of the time when he's in a scene, no matter what he's playing, I'm like, that accountant is about to be thrown out a window.
Sure enough, he got thrown out of a window.
It's like that, you know, that ER doctor is about to be run over by a truck because it's Papa John, you know, or he's going to throw a punch, or someone's going to shoot him and he's going to go flying over a desk or something like that.
Yeah. Listen, if I could say something about your actor friend, I still remember in that performance, it's very Shatner-esque, but in one scene, he's yelling at Spider-Man crawling on the walls, and he does this like jaw thing with his mouth, and it's very Shatner, like, you know, from Wrath of Khan, where he's like, Hughes was the most human. Like, it's this great, like, what are you? Doing
but
this great thing.
The thing about, and I said this to him at the time, what's great casting about Papa John is he can play a scary dude, but but he's a very human, warm person. And I think you get that. And I think Peter being responsible for his death, or his being, you know, like if the guy was just a complete nightmare.
Yeah.
Not just some guy who's robbing something because he's poor, which is the sense you get when Papa John is playing it.
Yeah.
Like there's a humanity to it that makes the whole circumstance more fraught than it would be if that was Michael Rooker. You know what I mean? If it was just like, Clancy Brown, and both of those guys also have great heart.
But they're usually play real bastards.
There's a sweetness to Papa John that you can't iron out of him, and it makes that character 1,000 times more tragic. So it's very.
He takes that mask off, and Tobey Maguire has the flashbacks, and one of them is like hold that door, and then the other one is Papa John as the door closing, he's going thanks, and it's a real genuine thanks as the elevator door closes, and he didn't capture him, and you're like, oh, what a sweet guy, he said thanks, and
then he killed Uncle Ben.
Then he shot Uncle Ben
in the car in the car from the Evil Dead movies. That's that's what we love about Sam Raimi.
So fun.
What would you like to read from A Princess of Mars?
I just reread it because I'm on a show called Nerdist Book Club, and we do episodes once a month, and I just reread it, and I think my favorite section of the entire book that I think actually has some pretty good writing is this chapter that I'm going to read. This is chapter 24, and I'll give you a little context beforehand. John Carter, there you go. Oh, very nice, very nice. Look at that. I have this
old 70s
paperback. Beautiful paperback. I've got a Disney edition that's got the first 3.
Oh, this is 63.
63.
Valentine Books,
nice.
1963. January, first printing, 1963. But the book itself is copyright 1912. From All Story magazine.
That's correct. That's where it was first serialized, and so many of the chapters read like these great little. Tune in next week to find out what happens. Totally. Which is great.
I'm sorry, you were saying.
The context is John Carter is a guy who fought for the South in the Civil War of the United States. Has a gold digging friend, Powell, that they like found a cave of gold, and they're going to try to figure out. Powell gets killed by Native Americans. They're not painted too nice in these first few chapters. And then he hides in a cave, somehow mysteriously clones his own body. There's a naked new clone that John Carter is inhabiting. He's looking down at his clothed self and going, I don't know how this happened. He looks up at Mars in the night sky of the Arizona desert and just like whisks to Mars.
Right.
It's really just magical and weird and fun. He learns how to jump good like Superman because he's got super strength. He meets a bunch of different characters, a princess, and now he's back looking for a way to get to, I think he's trying to get back to Helium because he wants to tell the people of Helium on the planet Barsoom, Mars, that he's found the missing princess and she's been held captive, and he's trying to go and rally their forces. But on the way, he's riding the desert in this cool little air flyer. He sees what he's about to see, and I'll take it from here. And I'm going to attempt to do a little bit of an impression of actor Taylor Kitsch, who played him in the 2012 Disney movie, as well as Willem Dafoe, who plays Tarkas. My favorite character in the story. This was like the least offensive section so this is why I'm going with this. Okay. Here we go. Chapter 24. Tarkas finds a friend. About noon, I passed low over a great dead city of ancient Mars, and as I skimmed out across the plain beyond, I came full upon several thousand green warriors engaged in a terrific battle. Scarcely had I seen them than a volley of shots was directed at me, and with the almost unfailing accuracy of their aim, my little craft was instantly a ruined wreck, sinking erratically to the ground. I fell almost directly in the center of the fierce combat, among warriors who had not seen my approach, so busily were they engaged in life and death struggles. The men were fighting on foot with long swords, while an occasional shot from a sharpshooter on the outskirts of the conflict would bring down a warrior who might for an instant separate himself from the entangled mass. As my machine sank among them, I realized that it was fight or die, with good chances of dying in any event, and so I struck the ground with drawn longsword, ready to defend myself as I could. I fell beside a huge monster who was engaged with 3 antagonists, and as I glanced at his fierce face, filled with the light of battle, I recognized Tarkas the Thark. He did not see me, as I was a trifle behind him, and just then the 3 warriors opposing him, and whom I recognized as war hoons, charged simultaneously. The mighty fellow made quick work of one of them, but in stepping back for another thrust, he fell over a dead body behind him, and was down and at the mercy of his foes in an instant. Quick as lightning they were upon him, and Tarkas would have been gathered to his fathers in short order had I not sprung before his prostrate form and engaged his adversaries. I had accounted for one of them when the mighty Thark regained his feet and quickly settled the other. He gave me one look, and a slight smile touched his grim lip as, touching my shoulder, he said, I would scarcely recognize you, John Carter, but there is no other mortal upon Barsoom who would have done what you have for me. I think I have learned that there is such a thing as friendship, my friend. He said no more, nor was there opportunity, for the war hoons were closing in about us, and together we fought, shoulder to shoulder, during all that long, hot afternoon, until the tide of battle turned, and the remnant of the fierce war hoon horde fell back upon their thoats and fled into the gathering darkness. 10,000 men had been engaged in that titanic struggle, and upon the field of battle lay 3,000 dead. Neither side asked or gave quarter, nor did they attempt to take prisoners. On our return to the city after the battle, we had gone directly to Tarkas' quarters, where I was left alone, while the chieftain attended the customary council, which immediately follows an engagement. As I sat awaiting the return of the Green Warrior, I heard something move in an adjoining apartment, and as I glanced up there, rushed suddenly upon me a huge and hideous creature, which bore me backward upon the pile of silks and furs upon which I had been reclining. It was Woola, faithful, loving Woola. He had found his way back to Thark, and, as Tarkas later told me, had gone immediately to my former quarters, where he had taken up his pathetic and seemingly hopeless watch for my return. Tal Hadgis knows that you are here, John Carter, said Tarkas on his return from the Jedak's quarters. Sarkoja saw and recognized you as we were returning. Tal Hadgis has ordered me to bring you before him tonight. I have 10 thoats, John Carter. You may take your choice from among them, and I will accompany you to the nearest waterway that leads to Helium. Tarkas may be a cruel green warrior, but he can be a friend as well. Come, we must start. And when you return, Tarkas, I asked. The wild Calots, possibly, or worse, he replied. Unless I should chance to have the opportunity I have so long waited of battling with Tal Hadgis. We will stay, Tarkas, and see Tal Hadgis tonight. You shall not sacrifice yourself, and it may be that tonight you can have the chance you wait. He objected strenuously, saying that Tal Hadgis often flew into wild fits of passion at the mere thought of the blow I had dealt him, and that if ever he laid his hands upon me, I would be subjected to the most horrible tortures. While we were eating, I repeated to Tarkas the story which Sola had told me that night upon the sea bottom during the march to Thark. He said but little, but the great muscles of his face worked in passion and in agony at recollection of the horrors which had been heaped upon the only thing he had ever loved in all his cold, cruel, terrible existence. He no longer demurred when I suggested that we go before Tal Hadgis, only saying that he would like to speak to Sarkoja first. At this request, I accompanied him to her quarters, and the look of venomous hatred she cast upon me was almost adequate recompense for any future misfortunes this accidental return to Thark might bring me. Sarkoja, said Tarkas, 40 years ago you were instrumental in bringing about the torture and death of a woman named Gozava. I have just discovered that the warrior who loved that woman has learned of your part in the transaction. He may not kill you, Sarkoja. It is not our custom. But there is nothing to prevent him tying one end of a strap about your neck and the other end to a wild thoat, merely to test your fitness to survive and help perpetuate our race. Having heard that he would do this on the morrow, I thought it only right to warn you, for I am just a man. The river is but a short pilgrimage, Sarkoja. Come, John Carter. The next morning, Sarkoja was gone, nor was she ever seen after. The end of that section.
That was a very good Willem Dafoe.
Thank you. I think it made up a little bit for my Keanu Reeves John Carter, but I'll take it.
That was it. I always think about Tarkas. I think he's the first of a particular archetype. I'm very hard pressed to find a previous version of Tarkas. Mm-hmm. But everything from Chewbacca to Worf. Mm-hmm. Worf is absolutely, like, personality wise, Worf reminds me so much of Tarkas. In the Micronauts comics, a Croyer was so built on the bones of Tarkas.
Yep.
Even Spock has just a touch of Tarkas in him. The alien who's the best friend of the white guy leading man.
Yeah.
And again, who teaches him tolerance and who teaches him that maybe the Apaches aren't all horrible murderous savages.
And the Tarkas or the Spock or the Worf, those characters are taught human emotion, human love, the sort of reader perspective of like, Vulcans are so this, and then Captain Kirk is able to convince Spock over time that that he can embrace his half human side, and the same goes for Worf and his human adoptive parents, and it's classic. It's great.
There's something. This is again such deep nerdity, but I know you're the right audience for it. There is something so subtle. A lot of people tend to disregard the first Star Trek movie, but Nimoy never disregarded it in his performances of Spock. If you go back to old Star Trek, like there's a line somewhere about why would I say thank you when you just do your duty? In Star Trek 2, when he's in command of the Enterprise, he says thank you to a human officer for something. And I'm like, the V'ger experience changed him and he is now at peace.
I love it.
Like the fact that he had whatever you think about that first movie, in the development of Spock, it's the end of Spock's arc. In that sense of Spock as a guy who doesn't know who he is and hasn't integrated the parts of him. The way he plays Spock in 2 through 6 and even in the later appearances, it's the integrated Spock, the Spock who doesn't hate being human, the Spock who is now a whole person. And all of that comes from Star Trek the Motion Picture, which people really don't want to like think about or acknowledge. But it's a very interesting, to me at least, it's a very interesting.
It's a really good point. I mean, his story arc was done, so he had to die in part 2. Like he died in the next one. So it's true.
Which is a thing you do now. I don't know if you remember these, but I was a huge fan of the Marvel. Do you have is there a trade now?
I've got the omnibus. There's not a trade. This was I should grab it. Hang on 1 second. I'm going to grab it because this is it's definitely worth talking about, I think. Hang on 1 sec. Let me get this here. All right. I've also got this collection of John Carter comics from like the 50s.
Oh wow.
This is a Weird Worlds, it's called, and this is and it's got an introduction by Marv Wolfman.
Nice.
I think he wrote on this very early. Let me check to see when
he
this
wrote
stuff
on the
was.
Marvel.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He was the writer. That's so funny.
Yeah,
I have to talk to Marv about that the next time I run into him at something.
So this was originally published in DC. This is in the back of Tarzan issues 207 to 209.
Sure.
And Weird Worlds 1 through 7. So this was 1972, 1973 DC Comics. So it's a very interesting. And Marv talked about how he was always trying to work on this, and when things switched over to Marvel, he didn't think he would be able to work on it anymore, but then he did.
Yeah.
Which is great. But
I thought he did a great job. That's got to be all of them, right? Because there were only about 30 or so.
Yeah, that's the whole kit and caboodle.
Oh, good.
The entire
I can get rid of some of my whole thing is getting rid of floppies and having trade paperbacks I can read.
I will say this: it's very out of print, and it was a little pricey for me to track down. But I am such a fan of holding the thing that so many people, so many creatives cite as a huge source of influence. Even Andrew Stanton, who wrote and directed the John Carter movie, he said this was his first exposure, was the Marvel books.
I first bought, this was one where I think post Star Wars, I probably bought like John Carter number 14 or something like that. And then it became one of those comics that I was always looking for in bins, and I would, but you know how sometimes there's like a tiny piece of trivia that gets stuck in your head and you're upset, you would have it removed surgically if you could. One of them is the Thark name for John Carter. Dotar Sojat.
Oh, yes.
Dotar, it's in there. It's not going anywhere. It's, and it's because there's a line in the first, and when you're young and you buy a comic and you love it and you don't have the rest of the series, So you reread that one issue over and over again. And there's a classic trope where John Carter is thrown in an arena to fight a Thark, and it's secretly Tarkas. And he lets John Carter know that he knows who he is by saying, Dotar Sojat, your time has come. And that just,
it's awesome.
That resonated with me forever. And I still remember that dumb, Dotar Sojat. But it's, but anyway, yeah, I loved those first 3 books. Like I said, I never really went beyond the first. I read 4 recently, and I was just like, I don't think I need to keep doing this. Just like Tarzan, I've read like 3 or 4 of the Tarzans, and they all kind of turn into the same thing at a certain point.
Absolutely.
As great a writer as Burroughs is, the repetition can get to be a little something.
I think that when you have adult brain and you're looking at this kind of work and probably a lot of pulp stuff in general, which I haven't dived too much into, but I am a big Robert E. Howard fan and an Edgar Rice Burroughs fan. I think that A Princess of Mars especially is fascinating to read today, because my takeaway today was, there's actually way more world building than I remember. And it's very clunky and it's very forced in there, but man, the world building is good. The ideas, the sci-fi ideas are so cool that I think that in reading that material, I feel like it's not something that I personally can just kind of recommend and hold up and be like, you should read this book, it'll definitely hold up. But rather the ideas contained within the world itself, the characters. I would love to see another resurgence of people trying to adapt it, whether it's an animated form or in the past few years, they put out a fantastic role-playing game. And that makes the most sense, because the whole world is just all these rules and it's world building. So to put out some kind of a Dungeons and Dragons adjacent product, I'm like, that's a no-brainer. That makes perfect sense. I would love for a great video game to come along. I would just love for new versions and new storytellers. I know we talked about like doing things like having John Carter be a black soldier, these kinds of projects that I'm seeing. Like, I would just love to see more people's take on this in a modern lens, while still trying to pull into the present that planetary romance, right? That feeling. That's what I love.
And and Dynamite is very big on Deja Thoris. And they keep doing the Deja Thoris Barbarella comic. I found very charming. The Betty Page thing. They came to me and said, we want to do a Betty Page series, and it was literally I admit it was just a commercial idea. They wanted Betty in the Red Sonja costume. They wanted Betty in the Vampirella costume. I said, the thing about Betty in the Vampirella costume is that's just Vampirella, because Vampirella is Betty Page in a monokini. I realized that when I sat down to write. I was like, Barry Ackerman showed a picture of Betty Page to the person who first drew Vampirella.
There you go.
And they wanted Deja Thoris, and it allowed me to riff on those characters. Awesome. But the idea from the publisher was, well, maybe she's making movies or whatever. And I had introduced Yog Sothoth as a villain in an earlier thing. I said, no, this is going to be, she jumps into a parallel universe where she's Red Sonja. Wow. She jumps into a parallel universe, and I called it Crisis on Infinite Bettys, because you can. And Scott Chandler, God bless him, for the second issue of that series, he did the George Perez issue 1, Crisis on Infinite Earth, but everyone's Betty Page.
Oh my gosh.
Like Superman is Betty Page, and Wonder Woman is Betty Page, and the Green Lantern is Betty Page. It's very, 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 very funny cover. But and then the 4th issue, Dynamite didn't particularly have a 4th character for me. But we were talking about this before. John Royal had drawn a Betty as Tinkerbell that I had never used on an issue. And I was like, let's drag that out. Yeah. And then literally the 4th issue of that series is Cthulhu versus Tinkerbell, which is one of my favorite things I've ever written in my life.
That's funny. That's so funny.
You talk about, the way we strip mine pop culture. When I started working on that, and I had Tinkerbell, and I had I had all of the monsters from Lovecraft. I was like, well, what if is Neverland, is Skull Island? What if this is all the same?
Wow.
And the pirates and the Lost Boys kind of make an alliance because they're, the island's covered in monsters.
Yeah.
And all this. It was a lot of fun to do.
That's so cool.
And, again, being able to write these sort of stock characters and do little things that are, echoes of what
I love it.
I was able to write, one of my favorite moments I've ever written is Peter Pan pulling back the slide on a Lewis machine gun, facing down the great old ones and saying to die would be an awfully big adventure.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Thank you. That's just some pulpy goodness. And you just love, playing with these characters. It's one of the great things about writing for comic books is being able to work with the stuff you loved when you were a kid. And creating your own thing is a very separate experience.
Yeah.
But being able to sort of take a tour through all of the tropes you loved and sort of show people, this is what I love about this. This is what I love about Deja Thoris. This is what I love about Vampirella. Even, it's that part of it is definitely a gift.
It's got to be a really fun, and I imagine even challenging exercise to try and recall what about these things like affected us when we had kid brain, like you just mentioned that Peter Pan scene. And I'm like, that would have blown my mind if I saw that as a kid.
That's the other thing is
Pulp, it's so great.
You're doing it for the audience that you used to be. What do I love about this? And what do I, and it's interesting to me, like Dynamite's had James Bond for a bunch of years now. And I love James Bond stuff. I have not come up with a pitch.
Yeah.
Partially because it's been around so long that doing like a boilerplate supervillain with a boilerplate secret lair and a boilerplate plan for world domination, I'm no longer interested in that.
I know.
You know what I mean? Like all of my best James Bond idea is the one that the fan theory that everyone has.
Yep.
And I would love to do that, but I know Eon Productions would never, ever, ever, ever let me do that. Literally the one Bond thing I've tried to write opens with, for want of a better description, George Lazenby, looking like a homeless guy, stopping Daniel Craig on the streets of London saying, "What year did Tracy die?"
Yeah.
"What year did Tracy die?" And he goes, 1969. Okay, how old are you?
Yeah.
Wait, I was 4 when my wife died?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any, just like the whole idea of SAS commandos being brainwashed to think they're James Bond for 40 years. I think
brilliant.
It's fun. Yeah, the other scene that I loved, all of this stuff that's just dreams that you'll never get to write. But the second scene is Judi Dench on a beach with Patrick McGowan and Sean Connery going, "I know you two are behind what happened.
Yep.
I know you're trying to shake up and destroy the 007 program, and it's not going to work. I threw the two of you in the village. I will find Timothy Dalton and Pierce Brosnan and Lazenby, and they're going to end up here too.
Yeah.
If you're putting them up to bed."
That's great. Yeah. It's all the Bonds having to team up. Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's and I had this idea of giving them all that the 00 number would be followed by the year, that Connery is 00761 and 0772 and but also that their code names are the Thug, the Gentleman, the Assassin, which is Timothy Dalton.
Okay, the Assassin's Dalton. The Thug is that Craig?
That could be Craig or Connery, depending on how you look at it. Because Connery was kind of the blunt instrument. The Gentleman was more. Playboy was Brosnan. Yeah.
Yep.
That was
and
all
then
like.
The model was Lazenby. Who was Lazenby?
Lazenby was the madman because he does one mission and it goes terribly. He does all the things you're not supposed to do. He falls in love with the girl. He marries her and then she's murdered. And they literally have to drag the Thug back from the village for one more adventure to kill Blofeld.
Love it. That's great.
But again, Eon Productions would never ever let me do that.
I know.
Anyway, I should wrap this up. This was so great, Hector.
So much fun. Hey, thanks for letting me talk about John Carter, a thing that I could not have expected I would end up loving when I was a kid. But, as I got older and a little bit more interested in the DNA of the stuff that I love.
Well, that's why I do this.
Yeah.
That's why I do this series partially, is to sort of show people the DNA, to tell them that Superman is just Doc Savage, plus John Carter, plus all of that. I think, because to me, it doesn't ruin it. It's like, I did a thing on Red Harvest, Dashiell Hammett's Red Harvest, which is literally the first man with no name. Literally, everyone from
very cool
Clint Eastwood to Toshiro Mifune to Pedro Pascal currently are doing variations on the man with no name.
Absolutely.
All from Dashiell Hammett, all from a 1934 brilliant crime novel, which hilariously to me has been adapted as everything but the original novel. Because even the Walter Hill gangster version with Bruce Willis throws out too much of the plot of the novel to really be a good adaptation of the novel. But anyway, thank you so much, Hector. I'll let you know when this goes live, and
great.
to the fans watching at home, we'll see you on the next one.